Okay, so far I've talked about pump efficiency, horsepower, hydraulic horsepower, brake horsepower, motor power. However, I think it's important now to talk about pump curves and operating point, because for the pump operator, there are two major parameters that they are interested in. They're interested in the flow rate, which basically tells us how much of the fluid needs to be moved per unit time, and also the pressure, which tells us how much of the hydraulic resistance needs to be overcome by the pump in order to move the fluid at a particular flow rate. So, a pump curve basically shows the relationship between the pump flow rate and the pump pressure. It's a graphical representation of a pump's performance based on testing that is conducted by the manufacturer themselves. So they provide you with a pump curve. And each pump is essentially will have its own pump performance curve, and it varies from pump to pump. And the pump curve is essentially based on the pump horsepower and the size and the shape of the impeller. So you could see here for a centrifugal type of pump, the pump curve for the pressure versus the flow rate has this shape, as opposed to a positive displacement pump where the pressure versus flow rate of the pump has this line. And so you could see right off the bat is if you have a process that you're going to be fluctuating the flow rate, or you want it to operate at a range of flow rates, then you're better off purchasing a centrifugal pump where you could change the flow rates of your centrifugal pump. Comes at the expense of the pressure that the pump can deliver. However, when you purchase a positive displacement pump, you see that it gives you somewhat a steady flow rate at a range of different discharge pressures. The operating point of a pump is the intersection point of the pump curve, which is given to you by the pump manufacturer, and the system curve, which is the curve that you develop. If you remember chapter 2, the very last example, we've practiced on how to make system curves. And essentially the system curve, the point where it intersects with the pump curve, would be the operating point. So if we had installed a pump, then essentially the point where the system curve intersects with the pump curve is the flow rate that you will be generating at that particular pressure that the pump will be delivering at. And this is for a centrifugal pump, and for a displacement pump, it's no different. It's the same concept where your system curve intersects with the pump curve is the operating point. And if you remember the system curve we've developed from considering an energy balance around the piping configuration.